Welcome into episode 6 of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast, where today my guest is Sean Fahey, and we will talk about ways to celebrate student work and ways to facilitate students' voices being heard and valued. We'll also discuss FlipGrid, Wakelet, Padlet, backchannelchat.com, YoTeach, and Google Drawings, Sites, Classroom, and Slides, plus my soapbox moment with a favorite Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quote, and some listener-submitted content. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast with Jake Miller.
Hello, duct tapers. As you probably already know, my name is Jake, and I'm here to talk about duct tape and educational technology and how, in my odd brain, the two of them work together to create an educational technology decision-making protocol. I'm also here to say silly things, share a few laughs, and have some fun. A few things right off the bat. First off, after Sarah Rivera shared about their awesome EdTech tool in episode 3, PeerGrade reached out to me to offer a few months of free pro features to duct tapers. If you're interested, just use the code DuctTape19, that's DuctTape19, for 3 months of PeerGrade's pro features for free. On the day this episode comes out, there is about 2 days left for your chance to win some free stickers by tweeting about the show using the hashtag EDUDuctTape. That's hashtag EDUDuctTape. Once the calendar flips to February 2019, I'll be selecting 20 people who tweeted with the hashtag during January to send free stickers too. And you know what? If January 2019 is over when you're listening to this, I still do appreciate hearing your feedback and your celebrations of the things you're discovering that you could use in your classroom from the show. So please do keep using that hashtag. Speaking of those tweets, I'll be sharing some of them and giving shout-outs to some of those tweeps at the end of the episode, as well as sharing some feedback from the FlipGrid grids for the podcast. On the topic of those FlipGrid grids, you can find them by heading over to eduducttape.com, looking for the Educational Duct Tape FlipGrid community and clicking the link. Lots of duct tapers have shared there, which is super exciting, and I'm sure that those of you in this learning community will continue to give suggestions for educational duct tape questions for my upcoming guests and I to address. It's kind of my way of giving back to you. I feel so blessed to already have a group of loyal listeners who have said so many kind things, and this helps me gear the content towards your needs. So jump over to eduducttape.com, look for the Educational Duct Tape FlipGrid community, click the link, and then select the Educational Duct Tape Questions grid. And then there are 2 other grids there that you could check out too. And again, don't forget to tell us your name and where you're from. Speaking of sharing some of those videos and episodes, let's share a bit right now. So last week I shared Linda Hummer's question about a Chromebook tool that replicates what Chatterpix does on iPads. Our friend Abby Thomas replied promptly and suggested Blabberize, which really is a great tool to replace Chatterpix. So I did a little fist pump, said, "Oh yeah, there's our answer," and shared it in the episode. Another loyal listener, Dan Gallagher, replied though after the episode aired and reminded me and us about something important that we have to consider nowadays in regards to EdTech, and it may just make us pump the brakes a bit on Blabberize. Let's see what he has to say.
Hi Linda, my name's Dan Gallagher. Let me grab my soapbox. I understand Chatterpix Kids. I love that app on the iPad. When I went from supporting teachers on iPads to supporting teachers on Chromebooks, I tried looking to find, and I've used Blabberize, and it's a great option out there. There's just a hesitation. We have to, with the tech tools, and nowadays with COPA and FERPA and all that, we have to check terms of service. So depending on the age group of the students you're planning to use this with, Blabberize might not work. Their terms of service say that users have to be 18 and older. There's a little wiggle room with if you are 13 to 18, as long as you have parent or guardian permission and you're being supervised while using it, you can have an account and use the tool. Under 13, you cannot use Blabberize. So that's one thing, as tech coaches, as integration specialists, classroom teachers, whenever we're utilizing technology with students, we have to make sure that we're following the privacy policy and terms of service of that tool. So I haven't found anything else out there that does that would work for younger students. Hopefully something will come around soon that will be able to be the equivalent to Chatterpix on a Chromebook.
This is such a bummer to have to be concerned about, but Dan is right, and we appreciate him sharing this with us. We have to be cautious about the apps and risks that we expose our students to. To be honest, I can't find anything on Blabberize that makes it seem like a risky move aside from their policies and statements that Dan found. In the end, it's best to do your research and discuss with those involved in technology integration and administration in your school prior to using a new tool. And this is where we tend to think, OMG, I'm never going to be able to use anything innovative because they have to meet such high standards. Listen, I've felt that way before too, but what you have to remember is all of the innovative things that we could do with just one or two of the already approved tools that we use. So if you lose Blabberize because of this, you can look and say, well, look at Google Slides, for example. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of innovative ways to use them. Actually, to be honest, educational duct tape moment here for me too. You really could put those pictures that you would use in Chatterpix or Blabberize into a Google Slides. This is a little bit tricky, but crop the picture up to the mouth of the character and then duplicate it and crop out the bottom half. So you have two separate pictures, like chin to bottom lip, and then top lip to forehead, if you can imagine what I'm saying here. And then using stop motion slides, have the pictures go up and down, to make the mouth seem to be opening and closing while you're recording in Screencastify. So you can actually kind of mimic this process by hacking a picture in Google Slides. And I'm realizing right now while I'm saying this out loud that it's probably really hard to understand what the heck I'm talking about in an audio format. You need to see it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go make one of my edu GIFs that I love to make. I'm going to put it on jakemiller.net. I'm going to put it on Twitter, and I'm also going to link it in the show notes. So if you're curious about how to do this, check it out in the show notes and click on that link and check it on my site. And let me know if you try it out. I'd love to hear more about it. So that's a little hack that could replace it. Is it as easy as Blabberize or Chatterpix? No, but it's innovative and it's safe for kids because we already know they could use Google Slides in the classroom, and you probably already know they could use Screencastify in your classroom too. We'll talk about FlipGrid later in this episode, and the same is true of FlipGrid. It most likely is already approved in your district or your school, and you could think of dozens of amazing ways to use it. So while you might lose a tool here or there, you still have plenty of innovative things you could do with some other tools that you already have in place. So I guess the best that I could say is be careful, be cautious, and when all else fails, innovate with what you've already got. Big thanks, by the way, to Linda for having that educational duct tape mindset of having a problem and a need of something innovative she wants to do for her students and reaching out to try to find a solution, and to Abby for being so giving in her solution, and for Dan for helping us make sure that we're abiding by the different rules and expectations that we have. What a great little community we have where people are thinking together and sharing together and supporting each other. Very, very exciting. That whole discussion felt a little soapboxy, but guess what? There's more where that came from. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Let me just grab my soapbox from over here. Yeah. There we go. That's perfect. Climb up on there. Okay, here I am, standing tall atop my soapbox. So, back in the fall, I was speaking about educational duct tape to the educators in a school district that was in the early stages of moving towards having one-to-one Chromebooks. Some of the teachers were feeling frustrated because they felt like they were behind other districts that were already one-to-one, while their district was phasing it in one building at a time over the next few years. Others were feeling frustrated because they wanted to be innovative and integrate technology, but felt limited by the shared computer carts that they were using while they waited for one-to-one to get to their building. I actually told them that I liked their administration strategy. While it would certainly have been ideal for them to have already been one-to-one, it was good that they were not putting the cart before the horse. They had brought me in to talk to their staff before it happened, and they're actually bringing me back next year to talk to them again as they're a little bit deeper into the process, though not yet all of the way one-to-one. So the district is focusing on moving the mindset, the skill set, and the knowledge set forward while they gradually bring the devices in. I've spoken at other districts who are trying to recover from an unfortunate start in which they bought the devices before preparing their staff. Anyhow, this story popped back into my mind a few days ago when I saw a quote from the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in celebration of MLK Day. The quote said, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward." Dr. King had something far greater in mind when he said this, but I think that it applies here with educational technology as well. You may look on Twitter or at your local tech conference or even at your rock star coworker at a staff meeting and think, wow, I can't fly like that. But maybe you're just not ready to fly, so you should run. or walk or crawl, but you've just got to keep moving forward. And that reminded me of that school district that is bringing their staff's mindset and skill set along while they gradually phase in student devices. It might seem like a walk or even a crawl, but as long as they're moving forward to the best of their ability, they're doing what's right for their learners. Speaking of moving forward, let's move forward with the episode now.
Today's guest.
All right, today our guest is Sean Fahey. Sean is a former elementary and middle school teacher from Southern Indiana. Currently, he works as an innovative learning specialist with 5-Star Technology Solutions. In this role, Sean collaborates with teachers and guides them as an e-coach to help integrate technology into classrooms and make awesome learning experiences for students. You can find Sean on Twitter at Sean J. Fahey. That's Sean, S-E-A-N, J. Fahey, or reach out to him in email at sfahey@5-startech.com. And those will both be in the show notes so that you could find them and reach out to Sean. How's it going today, Sean?
It's going pretty good. How about yourself?
It's going great. I'm glad you were able to make it on the show. This is exciting for me.
Yeah, I've enjoyed listening and very honored that you reached out to me to have me come on and chat with you today.
Yeah, we've probably got, I think, 10 listeners today. We add one every episode, so there are 10 people listening to this. Doesn't that feel exciting?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
So I first became aware of Sean via Twitter, as I do with most people in educational technology. And seriously, listeners, if you're not on Twitter, you need to get on Twitter. And if you need help, please reach out to me. I'll give you some tips. But Twitter is the best place to find educational technology information. But anyhow, I know Sean on Twitter from two different things. One is his involvement in the Ditch Book chats. And those are Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. Is that right?
Thursday night.
Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern. You see how well I remember to get on. I have a calendar event that reminds me it's time for Ditch Book. And I make it on once a month or so. And Sean, you're pretty regular on there, right?
I try to be. It kind of gets late at night sometimes for our East Coast people, but it's a good chat. It's only 30 minutes, so you can get on there and then hit the sack pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's always it's a blur because it's just a half an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other place I know Sean from, aside from the Ditch Book chats, is he's become an expert and an advocate in the use of FlipGrid in the classroom. And I know, Sean, we're now a couple years into you co-authoring an ebook for teachers about how to use FlipGrid. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so it actually kind of started last September 2017, I believe. Just my use of FlipGrid and kind of just sharing all the excitement around it. And myself and a Twitter friend, Carly Mora from California, were asked to host a FlipGrid webinar about using FlipGrid and all this other kind of stuff. And so we kind of like, hey, we want to make a takeaway for these teachers about using FlipGrid, and it evolved into this, PDF ebook that you can download for free, and it's been shared. If you follow FlipGrid on Twitter at all, you'll probably see that it gets tweeted out pretty regularly that they have endorsed it. So you can find that if you're interested in FlipGrid or don't know much about FlipGrid. It's at a bit.ly short link. So bit.ly/FlipGrid ebook 3, just the number 3, because it's the third version of it.
Yeah, and I'm going to put that in the show notes. I really recommend everybody check that out because even myself, and I've used FlipGrid since the inception, and I've tried different types of uses of FlipGrid. I wouldn't say I'm an expert at FlipGrid, but I know it pretty well, and I can get in there and accomplish what I need to do. But even when I open it up, I'm like, oh, I didn't know about that, or I never thought about using it that way. It really is written from the perspective of an educator to educators and ways to do innovative things for kids. Wouldn't you say it's not just like the step 1, log in with this account. Step 2, go to this website. It really is a how-to for educators.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that it was practical and relevant to teachers. I mean, we did everything from creating an account to, how to provide feedback and then awesome ways to use it in the classroom as well. So we've gotten a lot of great feedback from it. So it's free to download, save, print, share with educators, use in your professional development.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great tool. So, and you co-authored that with Carly Mora. So Carly's actually going to be on the next episode of educational duct tape. You get to beat her on by one episode.
Yes.
I feel like I should have asked, not that you guys are newlyweds, but I should have asked you guys like a newlywed game kind of question and asked you like, what is Carly's favorite band? And then next week we could have asked her if you were right or something. Why did I do that? What question should I ask you here?
Oh man, I don't know, because I don't know. I really don't know. We collaborate and talk a lot on Twitter, that's for sure. And we've done a lot of great things with HyperDocs as well. And so I'll be looking forward to listening to that episode as well.
Yeah. So I have two questions for you. And then next week I'm going to ask Carly for the answers.
Okay, great.
Okay. So first, yeah, exactly. So if Carly was ordering a pizza, what would she order as a topping?
Oh, she's from California.
Right.
So, and I don't think she's going to go like really big, heavy into, like a lot of toppings. I think she's, probably something more along vegetables. That's all I'm going to say is vegetables. Maybe some mushrooms, throw that in there.
She's got like some spinach and Alfredo sauce and some like Roma tomatoes around there.
I think so. I think you're exactly right.
Okay. My second question is, what is Carly currently binging on Netflix?
That's kind of hard because I don't have Netflix.
Oh, it's every TV show. So guess a TV show.
Friends. Because she tweets out and a lot of GIFs on. Did I say that right? Friends.
Yeah, I think maybe that's one that she goes back to regularly. Maybe we're going to find out next week.
Good deal.
Just made sure that everybody else tunes in next week. All 10 people are like waiting with bated breath for next week's episode to find out.
And bring a friend.
And then bring a friend, right? Guys, tune in. You could see if Sean could predict what Carly likes on her pizza and on her Netflix.
Exciting stuff you're creating here.
Right, exactly. So on the topic of ebooks, so you guys wrote that FlipGrid one together, and it's in the 3rd edition, and it's out there and free and available. I know you also did one for Wakelet, which I actually haven't seen yet. Could you tell me more about that one?
Yeah, Wakelet is a pretty interesting, neat little new tool that's available out there, and I kind of learned about it, I think, about a year ago. To be exact, I just started using it, and I really enjoy using it. And so myself and Carly were reached out. We were started using Wakelet, and kind of, as teachers do on Twitter. You talked about teachers on Twitter; they start sharing the things that they're doing and things like that. And so Wakelet took notice and said, "Hey, would you care to help spearhead?" So we gathered some of our other Wakelet knowledgeable friends, so like Carly Mora, Jen Sarnin, John Bemerly. Randall Sampson, I think he's from the Ohio area. Mm-hmm. Scott Titmus and Paul West. We kind of collaborated together and created a Wakelet ebook for free for everybody to use and kind of learn how to use this tool. It's not necessarily a ed tech tool like FlipGrid was. FlipGrid was created to use in the classroom setting. Wakelet doesn't really have an ed tech background, but they're kind of seeing value, and a lot of teachers have started using it as a resource to help with their ed tech, finding tools to solve problems like you said. And so that's been one of the things that teachers have started using. And so I was honored that they trusted us to represent their brand and create something. So you can find that ebook it's a bit.ly link again, just bit.ly/Wakelet ebook. And it's Wakelet like a wake in a wave.
Yeah, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. I'm really excited to look at that one because I use Wakelet personally kind of for curating content myself and for organizing some of my own resources, but I have yet to use it with students. I have some ideas for how to use it with students, but I'm really excited to see what you guys are sharing in there because I think there'll probably be some ahas, as Jen Giffen and Kim Polishuk would say, some ahas for how I could use that in the classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't really know if we need to do any goofy stuff right now because we've already tried to play the newlywed game between you and Carly, but we're gonna go for it anyhow. Before we jump into the educational technology stuff and the educational duct tape, we're gonna play a little game here. So we're gonna play 2 truths and 1 lie.
2 truths and 1 lie.
All right. So I need to give you 2 truths and 1 lie.
Yep. And I'm gonna try to guess it. We'll see how I'll do.
All right. So my first statement, I'm gonna try not to give it away, is you can go skiing in my hometown. My next statement is I have all of my original teeth that I'm supposed to have. Like I did lose my baby teeth, but still have all my teeth.
It would be really creepy if you have the baby ones and the adult ones. That's your lie right
there. In the first grade, I was left at a skating rink during a birthday party.
Oh my gosh, that sounds traumatic. Okay, all right. Okay, so you can go skiing in his own town. He has all of his adult teeth, but none of his baby teeth. Or what was the last one again? I forgot now. Oh, you were left
in the first
grade in the roller rink. I think that sounds like something to be burned in your memory because that sounds pretty traumatic. So I'm saying it's the roller rink one.
That's the lie?
That's the lie. Yep. No, that's a true one. Oh gosh, I'm doing my own game backwards. That's the truth. The lie is the skiing.
No, that's actually true.
Ah, man. What course is it?
It's called Paoli Peaks. It's, Southern Indiana. Some people might think of Indiana as Indianapolis. It's pretty flat, but if you get down here in the southern area, close to the Ohio River in Kentucky, we got some pretty good hills. It's actually, fun fact, it's actually an old pig farm, and they make probably 90% of their snow, and they rely on pure cold weather to get this snow slopes going.
Wow. Okay. So that one was the true one. Okay. What's the lie?
The lie is I do not have all of my adult teeth.
Do you have all of your baby teeth?
No, those have been lost for a long time.
Okay. So what's the story of the lost one?
In 7th grade, at my school, we had during lunch period, our junior high lunch period was a little bit longer, and the gym was actually right next to the cafeteria. So they allowed the junior high, like after they ate, could go over there and kind of have a junior high recess type thing where you can just sit on the bleachers or, play, games or basketball. So of course, Indiana Hoosiers, all this kind of stuff, Hoosier State playing basketball.
Yeah. And
I got popped in the jaw really good going for a rebound, and my tooth snapped back in my mouth, and they tried to save it, but they had to pull it, and I have a permanent not denture, but permanent implant now.
Oh man, does that sound painful?
It was like I didn't get the permanent implant finalized until my freshman year in high school. So it was like a 2-year process of like surgeries and, procedures and different things like that. So
yeah, well, probably more traumatic than being left at the roller rink. That sounds like it was pretty rough.
I was freaking out at the roller rink whenever, but no, yeah.
So now let's dive into the actual educational duct tape. And just a refresher for the listeners, in case we have that, like I said, one new listener today, we went up from 9 to 10. So for number 10, educational duct tape is my metaphor that educational technology is at its best in the classroom when it is not the goal of a lesson or an activity, but it is a tool being used to address a goal or solve a problem or meet a need or address a learning standard. Kind of the same way we never set forth to just use duct tape. We always are using it as a tool to solve a problem. Educational technology is the same way. So we'll talk about 2 questions, 2 problems or goals that you could have in your classroom, and then give some educational technology suggestions for how to resolve those. Sound good?
Absolutely.
Okay, number 10 is all filled in, so now we can go. So my first question here, how can teachers show off student creations or have the students show off their own creations?
I'm going to kind of take a step back with that question, actually. First, I think whenever we're designing lessons, we need to ensure that students are given opportunities to create something, right? So they need to have choices to create something. And not just copying an example, I think, right? So sometimes we have like, you're going to make a poster. Then so like everybody makes a poster and it's like, it's just copying and they want to see that teacher example or that teacher gives an example. This is what you're going to create. Well, there's not really a lot of creation. It's just a lot of copying in my opinion.
Right.
So you need to allow students some freedoms to express themselves and understand and show their understanding of the content being learned.
Right. I like that a lot because otherwise, why would you want to show off what the kids are doing if you're not giving them the opportunity to show something different from what everybody else is doing, right?
Yeah. And I'm not saying like, you can't, I mean, there's templates are fantastic, to give them, but, letting them kind of go on outside the lines a little bit sometimes. We just got to have to release and let go sometimes. as educators, I think, and let students have expression in their work and be proud of that.
Right. I totally agree.
So in the first part of the question, you kind of said, like, how can teachers show off student creations? To me, I immediately think of creating some sort of website. If you think of any relevant business today in this 21st century that wants to be seen, they have some sort of online presence, whether that is a website or even social media. So I think we can do the same thing for students and the things that they create, whether it's digital or not. For me, Google Sites is a great way to create a simple, easy website. If you're a G Suite school, have Chromebooks or whatever that is, it works great to link or embed various Google apps or creations that your students might be doing. And you can have that open to the whole world if you want to. You can kind of create a short URL link, like a bit.ly link, like those ebooks, to make it easier for like parents or community members to find and to see what's going on in there. Or you can have it closed to a select people. So you can provide just access to like the parents of the students. So if we need to protect privacy for younger students and things like that, depending on what you want to put on there, right? So, there's all sorts of other website creation tools that one I've used before was Weebly. It has a pretty good educator version that you can actually get like student accounts and kind of have a blogging platform as well. So I think having teachers take the time and pull out student creations to display, whether it's to parents publicly or just for the students, like, hey, we're going to share our work. We're going to create a kind of a community where we're sharing and showing off what we're doing and creating.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's almost like you're saying that teachers have a portfolio instead of the students have a portfolio, where the teachers are kind of curating what they're showing off.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I think teachers should be proud of the work that the students are doing, right? Yeah. Because that means your hard work as an educator, your passion, your efforts are being displayed as well. I think that there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But kind of like your other half of that question was like, how can like students show off their creations? And I was kind of thinking about that question, like, well, how can they do that? And I think really you first have to have a buy-in for students. And it kind of goes back to maybe some laying some groundwork in the culture of the classroom. Are we creating an environment that students feel confident in their creations that they create? That, if we just box them in and to create this one thing, maybe that's not their media of expertise. And I'm not saying like, a student doesn't like to draw, so we shouldn't never let them draw. We should, have them go to art and learn different things as well. But so we need to think about the culture in the classroom. Are we creating an environment that students feel confident in their creations and where they can share openly and get feedback? In my opinion, students should know that the work that they do adds value to others' learning in the classroom as well. An example of this to help students build confidence and to show off their creations is I did an activity using Google Drawings. One thing, have you ever done like an activity where you had students like just use a piece of paper and a pencil and they had to draw what directions you gave them?
Oh, like you say, like step by step, like you say, don't draw this, now draw that, now draw that, and kind of see where everybody ends up at, how they all interpret it, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So I did that with Google Drawings. One, to have students learn how to use Google Drawings and that toolbar, and it kind of go over into Google Slides. Mm-hmm. But I also used it as a lesson to show how everyone's work isn't going to be exactly the same. Right. And even though we might interpret the, directions a little bit differently, as long as we meet the requirements, it's a perfectly good piece of art. And this time it was created digitally. And then we were able to share that digitally within they downloaded the image and uploaded it to a shared Google Slides. And then we were able to show off each other's work and learn from each other's work. And so then I asked questions, I just had them observe it, right? I didn't really get into like critiquing because it was just a fun kind of beginning of the year activity to kind of help create that culture. But it helped me lay that foundation of supporting students and letting them be creative and, take those maybe risks of doing things a little bit different than what was given in directions and giving them choices to create and display their knowledge from the content.
Right. When you make the switch over to not wanting cookie cutter students and cookie cutter products and cookie cutter answers, you have to show to the kids, you have to kind of walk the walk of that and actually show them, I really I'm embracing the fact that you guys all have different perspectives, and I like the fact that you all come up with different things, right?
Exactly. And so it was kind of my way to tell the students, you have my permission to be you. I'm not looking for all the same stuff, right? So if Johnny next to you doesn't have the same answer as you, that doesn't mean he's wrong. That doesn't mean you're wrong. That just means somebody's got learning to do, or you both have learning to do, and let's share and help each other get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I like that a lot because that kind of builds on your first answer. So your first answer was we need to give the kids opportunities to create different things and express themselves and have some freedom. And now you're saying we need to build the environment that makes them feel safe to do that. You can't have one without the other. It won't work. You need to give them the opportunities to express themselves, and you need to give them a safe environment and model that you're hoping for. That's what you're looking for is difference, diversity, different perspectives. So you're kind of saying it really is about like a classroom culture and a pedagogy kind of thing, not the technology you're using.
Yeah, I mean, definitely technology is going to help students create things and to share things.
Right. So it really depends on the technology is the vehicle, the tool, the accelerator that allows you to do this, but the teacher really has to set that expectation and model that goal and that culture for it to work with the students. So I had a similar experience recently with a group of students I was working with. They were doing an activity about media literacy and determining if sites were trustworthy and reliable and accurate, and if they were biased and things like that for doing research projects. And what I had them do after they went through some steps to learn about different strategies for evaluating websites, looking at different websites that were fake, and learning about it, kind of developing an experiential way of determining what sites to trust and what not to. I said, okay, now we're going to make a Google drawing of an infographic that shows your strategy for determining what sites are useful in your research so that you can then look back to this drawing later. And it was like 75% of the kids in the class just looked at me with these like wide-eyed blank stares because I just gave them in Google Classroom a blank drawing with some basic instructions along the side and a pretty vague task. And they kind of didn't know where to go with it. You know, they were kind of overwhelmed by that, right? So I was doing that first step of giving them a chance to create. But I needed to do that second step that you're talking about there, where I'm showing them that it is safe to be different and it is safe to do things the way you want to do things and to be proud of the things you do. So what I did was I looked at the kids who had made some progress and I selected some that I thought were showing some potential. And I asked the kid, do you mind if I show this with the class? And so by the time I did that, we had 7 or 8 that I thought were pretty good, and they were all very different. And so I showed them to the class and I'd say, here's Sean. See, Sean kind of used the flow chart that he's going to go through, and he's going to answer this question. And if the answer is yes, he's going to do this. And here's Carly's, and Carly, she didn't use a flow chart. She just used this bulleted list, but she used pictures to enhance every item on the list. And then here's Matt's, and Matt didn't use a bulleted list or a flow chart. He used a checklist. And so he has these check boxes. And then by each checkbox, he has a screenshot of a site that does or does not match that, as an example. And here's another student, and I really like the way they used color to draw us into the image. And here's another student. I really like the way that they used some of the crazier font styles for the titles and then used the plain font for readability in the text. And so showed them these ideas. And then it was like everybody, like then their creative energy kicked in. They're like, now I've got an idea. Now I've got a starting point. Now I can go. But it also showed the kids there's not a right answer here, guys. There's a whole lot of right answers. Look at all this great stuff your classmates are doing. And it was almost like they weren't copying off of each other anymore. They were just seeing that they had the freedom to do it their own way. You know?
Yeah, I love that. And then once we start sharing, right, then they start inspiring others, and then they can say, I can show my creativity this way, or I can do it this way, or this way makes sense, which is somewhat like what you did, but I'm going to do it my way. And that's what I think a great reason why we need to have more, we need to get more teachers sharing and develop students into those that want to share. And I think maybe a downside of reason why, like what you said with your example of students kind of like, what am I supposed to do? He's like, how many times do we just do fill in the blank questions or worksheets or multiple choice where there is one correct answer, right? So
Right. And that's so comfortable for the students for there to be one correct answer, because you either get it or you don't, and then you move on. But something where we're giving them creativity, there's pressure with that. But then there's also that ownership that they end up taking pride in once they get past that initial pressure feeling.
Yeah.
Okay. So my answer here is similar. It's going to build off of what you did there. So you talked about how the teacher could build a website to share student creations, kind of exemplary work. And so I'm going similar to that. I'm going to go with it with a student portfolio. So having the students make their own portfolios. You mentioned Google Sites. That would be my first recommendation too. But the tool itself isn't really what matters. What matters is what you're having the kids do. And that's to select work that they've completed and created and take pride in and put it out there for other people to see. You mentioned it could be public to anybody, or it could be just the teacher and the student, or it could be just the teacher and the student and the parent. It could be whoever we want to have in that discussion of what the student's doing. When I used to teach a STEM class, it was a middle school STEM class. I taught 8th graders, and it became very apparent to me that my 8th grade students, even though they were excited about this new STEM class they were taking, they were not talking to their parents about it at all, because they were 13-year-olds. So of course they weren't talking to the parents at all. So when it really hit home for me that was what was happening was in a parent-teacher conference, and I'm sitting there with a team of teachers, and we're with these two parents, and the parents kind of go along the table talking to all the core subject area teachers. And the dad turns to me and he says, "And what do you teach?" And I said, "Oh, I'm his STEM teacher." And the dad, who was a mechanical engineer, said, "STEM? What's STEM?" And he goes, "Oh, wait, do you mean like science, technology, engineering, and math?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you're an engineer." Yeah. And he said, I didn't know my son was taking a STEM class. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I don't know, like, first of all, the dad should be a little more involved and know these things that are happening in his kid's life. Yeah. But I realized on my end, I needed to, do my due diligence to make sure that this stuff was communicated back to the parents. So that's where I had the kids start making digital portfolios, and they would just showcase all of the work they were doing on those portfolios. They'd embed in Google Slides, they'd embed in YouTube videos, they'd embed in docs and Google Drawings and pictures of things they had done that were hands-on and reflections and things like that. And then the parents would look at them towards the end of the 9 weeks that the kids were in my class and give some feedback to the kids on them. One thing that I wish I would have done a little bit differently is I wish I would have focused more on student growth. Maybe it wasn't quite practical in my class because it was more of an exploratory class where we were trying different things out. We were trying out coding, and then we were trying out 3D design, and we were trying out all different kinds of things. But I think especially in a core content area, it's important that those portfolios aren't just showing off the amazing work, they're showing off the amazing growth. And to do that, you have to say, this is the work I started with, and it's not perfect, and these are the things that are not great about it, and this is the work that I'm doing now, and this is the growth that I've seen. So they're showing off their growth, not just their work.
Yeah, and showing that portfolio and that growth is going to help build their confidence, right? And so at first, they might be timid, not really wanting to share, but, as they go on, they're going to say, well, look what I can do now. And they're going to want to hopefully put it on there or show it as well to show that growth and be proud in what they're learning and doing.
Right. It really models that growth mindset too.
Yep.
Okay, so now I know you've got a question you want to ask.
How can we, as educators, we're talking about students sharing, how can we as educators ensure that all students are heard? They might create a portfolio on a website, but how do we make sure that they are heard or seen and have that opportunity to share?
So I think this question plays really well off the previous one, because when I was talking about those digital portfolios that my students were making, one issue that I had was, even though the students were creating these amazing things and showcasing them on these digital portfolios, their classmates, like right next to them, had no idea what they had accomplished. So they had this wonderful portfolio, and I made sure that their parents saw it at least once during the quarter, hopefully more, but at least once. But sometimes it wasn't getting out to the other students in the room, and they weren't taking pride in that stuff. So it's an important question. How do we make sure that they're being heard, not only by the teacher, but by the learners around them, and that everybody's valuing what they're bringing to the table here? And this is one of the major times when educational technology is almost essential in the classroom. Like, you can't really do this without educational technology. I mean, you could have kids write something on a piece of paper and then hand it in, but then how do you get it back to the other kids to see it? Do you hang it all up on the bulletin board? And is anybody really going to stand at the bulletin board and read that? No. You can't ask them to share out loud, because then how would you get through all 25 kids? You'd waste a ton of class time.
Yeah.
So you really need a digital solution to make this work. And there's multiple levels here. So somebody in my role or your role, where we're coaches, we're integration specialists, and we're helping the teachers use the technology to enhance the experience. When the teacher says, how can I ensure that all my students are being heard and having the opportunity to share? You really have to say, well, tell me more, right? Like, what is it that you're hoping that they're heard about? Like what you're hoping they're talking about. So, and it depends on their answer to that question. So if they say something that's kind of maybe a lower level sharing, like you just want to make sure that everybody's had a chance to give their answer to a question, you might use something a little more basic like backchannelchat.com or YoTeach, which is not yoteach.com. I'll have to put the links to both of them in the show notes. But those are kind of alternatives to one of my old favorites, Today's Meet, which it really is just like an old school chat room, right? And everybody has a chance to answer and everybody can then respond to each other. So that's a good way to just get some basic text-based answers. I think YoTeach lets them draw too, but it really is pretty much just text-based. An alternative to doing that, if you really are just looking for pretty simple text-based communications back and forth, relatively short answer, is if you're in a Google school district to ask a short answer question in Google Classroom. Go into the classwork page, click insert, and go to question and set it as short answer. Make sure students can see each other's answers, make sure students can reply to each other's answers, and then you kind of foster a discussion in there. That's a great, simple way to do it. You can't get very deep with what you're doing, but they can communicate back and forth and they could share. Kind of kicking it up a notch would be to use something like Google Slides, give each kid a slide, and then say on your slide, answer this question or reflect on this reading or whatever. And they could put in text, pictures, videos, whatever they want to put in. And then all the kids can see what each other wrote and comment if they want to too. And that's a good collaboration skill thing, or cooperation, more like it, where they have to make sure they're not messing with other kids' slides. So it's a good activity there too. And then a notch up for that, where you're really kind of taking the reins off and giving kids lots of flexibility, is a tool like Padlet. I know Padlet isn't the darling of the ed tech industry anymore. A lot of teachers have kind of lost interest in Padlet now that they're not pretty much completely free, and they do have some relatively prohibitive pricing options there. But I think, if you're going to use it a lot, you pay for the tool if you are going to use it a lot. And Padlet's nice because it has the ability for the kids to post pictures, webcam pictures, videos, webcam videos, drawings, text, links, videos from off of YouTube, like pretty much anything you could think of, audio files. They could post to Padlet and then respond to each other, or like each other's posts, or upvote each other's posts, depending on what kind of settings the teacher wants to put in. So Padlet is nice for that, but I'm sure you have two here that might actually be my first options, even though I like all those options. So how would you ensure all students are heard and have the opportunity to share?
Well, I think you kind of mentioned on some things. For one, I think you have to be deliberate in making sure that you're giving time for students to share and giving time for their classmates to see each other's work. Right. So take that time and create routines for reflection and giving feedback. Because if you're not allowing them that time, they might not do that, because outside of school, they got other things going on other than going and seeing what my friend over here created in math class or whatever. Mm-hmm. So my top two kind of ways that I think to ensure all students are heard and have an opportunity to share is, my first one is FlipGrid. Because whenever I found out about FlipGrid, that was like my big major educational duct tape aha, right? Because I knew right then and there, I had a tool that I could use that would allow all students to respond to a question I had. So when I wanted to make sure all students were answering that one question, whether it was like an exit ticket, they can open up their devices, they could record a short video clip explaining their answer or whatnot. Continuing on with FlipGrid, they've done so many different upgrades and so many changes to, help us to better hear students. So you can, one, it's now 100% free. So that's great.
Right.
So you can have all those features of students can reply to each other. Students can, when they upload their response, it could be not just a recording of themselves. It can be something they've created, whether it's like an Adobe Spark or a screencast video. They can upload that file. Mm-hmm. They can add a link to the response. So they could be simply talking about, like, we mentioned people creating things in Google Drawing. So they could say, here's my Google Drawing project on insert name of project or topic. and I created it with this, this, and this. They kind of explain a little bit, and then check out the link for more.
Right.
Give me feedback on what you think it is. And so they can add a link to outside projects. You can, use guest mode to allow parents or experts in the field that you're studying come in to your grid and interact with students so they are heard and can ask questions. It goes on and on and on. Grid pals to kind of like that grid pin pal idea of connecting globally over a topic. So others are getting opportunity to share and be heard and back and forth communication.
Wow, I love some of those ideas there. So most of those are in that FlipGrid ebook, right?
Absolutely.
One of the things I really want to touch on that you mentioned there was using features like guest mode, which are not only a great way to make sure students' voices are being heard, but it makes a nice connection back to what Ann Radefeld and I discussed back in episode 2 about ways to connect our learners to the global learning community. We talked about Skype and Google Hangouts, but FlipGrid really is another great tool that you could use for that.
Yeah.
Like you're saying here, they could be connecting with other classes, they could be connecting with their parents, or even connecting with experts in the field. And if we do it right, they can be showcasing their thinking or their creations. They're not just connecting with them, they're actually showcasing what they're creating or what they're thinking or their thought processes, and having their voice be heard and valued, and they're feeling that. That's really awesome.
Yeah. My other suggestion is Wakelet, which we mentioned again earlier with that ebook.
Right.
Wakelet has a new collaboration feature, which allows teachers to set up a Wakelet, which is almost like just a bulletin board. It's very similar to Padlet in a way. I think it's a little bit much simpler to Padlet. That's actually, I think, where I first learned about Wakelet, is because it had some of the similarities to it. But now you have this collaboration feature where you create a collection and you can give students a place to post anything, whether it's a text response, kind of like a back channel. They can add a link. Anything that has a link can be kind of bookmarked or saved into a collection. They can upload a photo. They have options where you can embed a FlipGrid response, or it works with Screencastify. So you can open up Screencastify to save it directly to a collection where students can share a video as well. So
wow, those are some really cool ideas. Similar with what you said with FlipGrid, you're kind of hacking the tool to add this additional beneficial layer of functionality onto them. Wakelet might be a really nice tool if you're looking for more of a non-linear bulletin board, sharing space, or a discussion board kind of tool. Whereas FlipGrid, is for the straight video kind of stuff. But yeah, Wakelet for some of those kind of non-linear things would be really neat for kids to be able to share and post and curate stuff between a whole group of students.
Yeah.
I should point out, I'm a Wakelet fan, but I'm also a fan of Padlet. So I want to throw 2 notes in here about them before we move on. First, I think there's not one that's better than the other, but there may be one that's better for every educator's specific situation and need. It all goes back to that whole educational duct tape thing.
Yep.
You start with your pedagogical goal or your classroom need, and then decide which tool is best in that specific situation. It might be different from lesson to lesson or unit to unit, or maybe there's one that's just always better for your class based on your teaching style, your pedagogy, or your students, or your classroom, or whatever your needs might be.
Yeah, exactly.
I think in an upcoming episode, I'll need to do a bit of a comparison between the 2 tools, but that brings me actually to my second note about it, which is, to an extent, it might not even matter which one you use between Padlet and Wakelet, right? If your goal is what we're talking about here, which is giving students a voice and a place to share their voice and a place to hear and see what their classmates are sharing, both can achieve that. Sometimes it's less about the tool and more about the actual educational practice that you're sharing with your students, right?
Yeah.
So regardless, Padlet is good, and so is Wakelet, and it may not matter which one you use, or it might depend on what exactly you're trying to achieve in your classroom. Regardless, I really like what you shared about Wakelet as well as what you shared about FlipGrid.
Those are kind of been my go-to here recently when it comes to creating things or places, a safe place where students can share and then be heard and know that, hey, yes, everybody's creating this stuff. Everybody's answering questions. I don't want you to just turn it into Google Classroom or turn it into the tray in the back of the room. I want you to turn it into this one central location so we can all see your work, so we can all learn from each other and get better in what we're doing.
Oh, Sean, those are some super awesome ideas about using Wakelet and FlipGrid. Like I said earlier, it doesn't matter what you're using as a tool, as long as you're getting students these opportunities to be heard. But I do think some of the stuff that you shared about using FlipGrid and Wakelet really are mic drop items above and beyond the things that I shared, earlier in this question, just some really awesome ways. So I'm hoping that everybody listening is going to go to the show notes and click on the link to the FlipGrid ebook version 3, which shares ideas and some steps and some suggestions for how to do some of those things you talked about, as well as the ebook for Wakelet, which also shares how to do some of that stuff and how to get started using some of these things. And then most importantly, everybody could reach out to Sean at Sean J. Fahey on Twitter, or his email is sfahey@5-startech.com. Sean, thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, it has been an honor and a privilege. And I love your goal of this podcast of equipping teachers with tools that they can use to help enhance their teaching and student learning. So it was an honor to be a guest here.
Oh, thank you for being on. I hope everybody's going to follow Sean and hear more of his wisdom out there in the Twitterverse.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean. And there you have it. Plenty of great stuff from Sean Fahey. I really hope you'll follow him on Twitter and check out those 2 ebooks that he was a part of. Before we wrap it up for today, time to show some love to some of our loyal duct tapers. First up, I'm honored to already have 25-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, and I'd like to start sharing 1 review each week to show thanks to those people. So my first review was from Gabba Manny, which I have a funny feeling is our friend Manny Curiel, who we heard from last episode. And he says, Jake Miller is awesome. EDU Duct Tape was my very first podcast I ever heard. What a way to put the standard so high up. I really enjoy Jake's humor and knowledge. I have learned new apps and new ways to connect to people. This is an awesome listen when you're at the gym, running errands, commuting, or in the restroom when I'm trying to get a break from my 2 kids. LOL. Nice. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe now. Thank you so much, man. That's a great review. I really enjoy seeing the reviews out there. Next up on Twitter, dozens of people tweeted this past week with the hashtag EDU Duct Tape. That's EDUDUCTTAPE. Here are a few of my favorites, and then I've got some shout-outs for you. First up, Jen Ellison at JEllison23 said, great podcast, great episode. Hashtag tomorrow there'll be more of us. I love the Hamilton reference here, Jen. To be honest, back when I was pushing myself to launch the podcast, I just kept thinking, I am not throwing away my shot. And every now and then a little bit of, there's a million things I haven't done. I'm not a very good singer, am I? But also, just you wait. And I'm a big Hamilton fan as well, Jen. So I really enjoyed that hashtag there. Jessica D-Tech at Tech Musical said, I think the nearby traffic thought I was crazy for cheering to the radio alone in my car. I do that too, Jessica. And it's only when I'm listening to an educational technology podcast and I'm like, yes, I agree. Laura Cahill at Engage Educate knows your situation there. She said, I may have been shouting amen out my car windows on the way to work, listening to at Jake Miller Tech talk about paralysis by choice on his latest hashtag EDU Duct Tape podcast. I appreciate the kind words, Laura, and I hear you. I've been that guy yelling amen out the window on other shows as well. At C_Rod, Courtney says, hashtag EDU Duct Tape episode 1 had me at hello. I love it, Courtney. A little classic Jerry Maguire there. Our good friend Ann Radefeld, at Ann Radefeld from episode 2, said, laughing out loud in my car listening to hashtag which is more torturous between at Jake Miller Tech and at Mr. Oris Tech. Imagining you two sitting together at a tech conference, Jake with horse legs and a tail, Alex with bicycle legs. If Alex rolls away, Jake could run and catch him. If you don't know what she's talking about, you're just going to have to go back and listen to the episode with Alex Oris. New listener, I hope I pronounced the name right, Jania Menicucci, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, tweeted, it was so nice and so kind, but she said hashtag EDU Duck Tape, Duck, D-U-C-K, like quack, quack, duck. She was the first one, and I picked on her a little bit. She was a very good sport about it with my teasing and said, you can't win them all. Autocorrect is killing me, and not being able to edit tweets. Come on, Twitter. Let us edit our tweets, seriously. At Hartel30, that's John Hartman, responded to her and said, the podcast is exactly what it is quacked up to be. Love it. I love a good dad joke and some pun humor. At Mrs. _M Shields, that's Melissa Shields, on a slightly more serious note, tweeted some pictures of her class connecting with a Skype a Scientist virtual experience that she learned about in episode 2 with myself and Ann Radefeld. And that was just so cool seeing that, the pictures of her kids and the biologists they were speaking to, and a little bit of reflection about how it went. This is one of the favorite things about the podcast, is seeing the things that you're actually implementing in your classroom. Super exciting. Please do share when you discover things and then put them in practice with your students. So I've been listing lots of people who have used the hashtag each episode, and I've got to say, it just cannot be riveting audio to listen to. So instead, I'm just going to give shout-outs to the new hashtag EDU duct tape tweeters. If you've tweeted before, I still really, really appreciate you. Keep them coming. But from here on out, I'm just going to name the newbies each episode. So thanks for new tweeters at Bayer Emily, at B Techie Merritt, at Bus Ed, or Business Ed probably, Biz Ed 11, at C_Rod, at Ditch That Textbook, and that's the official account of the Ditch That Textbook blog and book, authored by the great Matt Miller, who you might be hearing sometime in the future on this here podcast. At Drop Step Dunk, at Funny Talkin' Tech, at J Ellison 23, at J Huff, I'm going to assume 24, at K Warrington 411, at Meredith Akers, at Mr. Bencherman, at Mrs_M Shields, at Ms. Brandy New, at Nordonia Monroe, at Orchestra_Tech, at Porter Towski. I'm having fun with these names. At Special Techie, at TCCSAPD, and at Teacher Tegler. Thank you, all of you guys, for tweeting. Let's finish it out with a couple of submissions to our FlipGrid board. First up, we've got John Hartman.
Hey there, Jake and fellow duct tapers. I'm John from St. Louis. I am a third grade teacher. I'm loving the podcast so far. It's light, it's funny, almost Seinfeld-esque, even if I was a little more partial to Kramer. But man, the content packs an influential and important punch. So hope you keep it up. Thanks again for doing this, and look forward to many more episodes.
Thanks, John. Can't go wrong with a Seinfeld reference. Next up, let's see what Dean has to say here.
Hi, Jake. Name's Dean Meyer, fifth grade teacher in Laingsburg, Michigan. Enjoyed your podcast, first couple episodes there. Certainly your story about duct tape. Not sure. I think it's a Canadian thing, although being from Michigan, we have access to it through PBS, an old show called The Red Green Show, and Red Green was a huge fan of duct tape. So I don't know if, I'm sure it's out there on YouTube or somewhere, but it's certainly worth checking out an episode. My Twitter handle, at Meyer Island, and teach fifth grade. Love your stories. Getting into podcasting with my kids this year. We got a podcast out there, Stitcher, Spotify, called Talking with 10-Year-Olds.
Thanks, Dean. I actually went out and checked out an episode of The Red Green Show on YouTube after hearing this FlipGrid submission from you. It was pretty hysterical. He was fixing a flat tire using duct tape. It was a good one. Also, I don't know if you noticed there, but Dean said that they have a podcast with him and his 10-year-old students called Talking with 10-Year-Olds. Definitely something worth checking out. But thanks to Dean and all the listeners. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. If you're still here listening here at the 58th minute or whatever we're at, I really, really appreciate it. And we will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Please visit eduducttape.com to join the discussion, share possible topics, inquire about being a guest, or contact Jake. And remember, duct is spelled with a T, not a quack quack K.